Are you getting ready to go bass fishing this spring but aren't sure what baits to use in the cold water temperatures? Well, today's video is for you. We're going to dive into the 3 baits I start with every spring, how to rig each of them, and when to use each one so that you can catch the most amount of fish this spring. The spring has finally arrived here in the Northeast. The ice has melted and we're out on the water. But with that comes a ton of challenges of very cold water temperatures and very inactive fish. When faced with these conditions of water temperatures in the high 30s or even 40-degree water temperature range, the bait choices are very, very limited this time of year. However, there are 3 that I really like to use, and I choose each one for a different reason to allow me to cover different areas of the water column or moods of the fish. Today's video, what we're going to do is walk you through each one. We're going to go through the setup and then go out on the water and show you how to fish it and when I would choose that lure to ensure that you can put each of these to the test on your body of water to catch the most amount of fish. So starting off with the very first one that I'm going to fish this time of year, it is what I catch probably my first bass every single year here in the Northeast on, and it's going to be a jig. Now there's 2 options that I have for a jig right here. Now the one I'm going to be using today is actually the one you've seen me make myself. It's one of these compact flipping jigs, and I have a chunk trailer rigged up on here so that it's a very small compact profile. That means I can get a lot of bites, especially when the water's cold. It's hard to get bites, so I want to have something small and compact to make sure I get the most amount of bites here. And it has no action in the trailer there. Something very small, compact, and flows through the water. Everything's cold, everything's moving slow. You want your jig to mimic that as well. I know you guys have mentioned on my other video where I talked about this jig that you want to see it get released. I'm just going to say stay tuned very shortly here. Something is coming. I'm not going to mention what it is yet, but you might want to watch some of my upcoming videos here if you want to get your hands on some of these guys in the very near future. Now, the other jig that I would fish this time of year is the 6th Sense hybrid jig. I've used this one a ton. I've caught tons of big fish in the early spring. I caught my Pennsylvania PB on this jig right here last spring in some very cold water temperature. And I pair this up with the 6th Sense bongo. It has a little bit more action than this jig does, and it's also a little bit bigger. But if I want to target some bigger fish, or the water's just slightly warmer, maybe not in the 30s, but up in the upper 40s or low 50s, that bongo trailer will work just fine, and you can work that through all the cover as well. So one of these 2 jigs is going to be perfect this time of year, and I pretty much fish each of them on their own special setup. This one, I fish it on a flipping rod, so something in the 7.3 heavy range with 20-pound test fluorocarbon, but the little jig that I'm going to be fishing here, I use it on my standard jig rod. This right here is the Cashin Element Z2. This is the 7.3 medium heavy fast action, just your standard jig rod. I put 17-pound test on here with a Corrado MGL in the 7:1 gear ratio. So anything you'd fish your Texas rigs on, you could fish this jig on. It's such a small compact setup that you can use pretty much any rod you already have. So let's head out on the water. We're gonna show you when I like to use this and how I like to use it to get the most amount of bites. So the jig is usually the first bait that I catch fish on every year just because of the fact that it works in any water temperature. I've caught fish down in the 30s. And the reason it works so well is you can just fish it so slowly around this cover, especially when these fish are super lethargic. But on a sunny day like this, these fish will get up in these logs and bushes and try and sun themselves and get a little bit of warmth, but they don't want anything moving fast from them. So I can fish the highest percentage targets on the lake, like these laydowns, and catch fish because I'm fishing something extremely slow in those areas. So what a typical retrieve looks like with this bait is I'm going to find a very high percentage area. I'm gonna flip my bait in there and let it fall on completely slack line all the way to the bottom. Hopefully one picks it up on the way down. But if they don't, what I'm gonna do is just kind of slowly reel up my slack and then just pull the bait towards me nice and slow and try and crawl it through everything down there. A lot of times there'll be one laydown on the surface, but the rest of the laydown will be under the water that you can't see. And that's actually what those fish will be in. But the one on the surface can tip you off on where you should be casting. So I'll put it over there. There should be some branches that fell off of this tree and are laying down in the bottom of the lake here. And then I will just slowly pull this thing towards me and feel it crawl over every limb down there. Kind of tough to fish when there's a little bit of wind because you have to fish this so slowly, but I literally count it come over every stick, rock, whatever's down there. I'm not hopping my jig like this or doing anything crazy with it. I'm literally throwing it out there, finding where I want it to be, knowing there should be a fish there, feeling very confident where I'm putting my bait, and then keeping it there as long as I can. So I'm just gonna slowly drag it and feel it come over everything. And when it comes over a log, I'll kill it, and I'll let that slack line, let it fall right back down on the other side of that log, and sometimes they'll grab it on the fall. But this is a very slow and methodical way that you need to fish this bait. It takes time. It's very painful to fish it, especially in cold water, especially when you are cold. So you'll be out here and it'll be 30 degrees. The water's really cold, the fish are really cold. You don't want to fish slow, but you have to in order to get the most amount of bites. Like that. Not a big one, but perfect example. I was just slowly dragging that thing on the bottom. You can see how slowly I was just pulling that thing. And then I felt him just gently pick it up and swim off with it. And then I was able to get him. But not a big one, like I said, just on that little jig right there. Again, stay tuned. There's gonna be some cool stuff coming with this here shortly. You'll be able to get some of these very, very soon, but we're gonna let him go and we'll move on to bait number 2. Now the next bait up for me is going to be a jerk bait. This is gonna be an excellent one in the springtime because you can let this thing just sit there and get those fish to come to you. However, there are a few things I pay attention to when I'm choosing a jerk bait this time of year because of how cold the water is. The first thing is I'm going to pick something with 3 hooks. I've talked about this on the channel before. There's 2 types of jerk baits categories that I classify them as. A 2-hook jerk bait like an X-Rap or a Lucky Craft pointer, and then a 3-hook jerkbait like a Megabass or the 6th Sense Provoke or something like that. The 3-hook jerkbaits have way less snap to them. They kind of glide through the water, and when the water and the fish are cold, you want your bait to do that. You don't want it darting back and forth and doing all kinds of crazy 360s and 180s in the water because the fish aren't doing that. So I pick something with 3 hooks, and then I choose the depth that I need. Usually I'll just tie both of these on because I have 2 jerkbait rods, but if you only have one, just depends on how deep you're fishing. The regular 6th Sense Provoke, that goes about 4 to 6 feet. So if I'm fishing anything 8 foot and less, I'm gonna use this one right here. You can alter your line size to get it to go even shallower if you need to. And then anything 8 foot or deeper, I'm going to use the deep version because that one's gonna get to 8 foot. So if you're fishing it in 8 and the fish are under in 12, they'll be able to come up and get it. So basically you want your bait to land above where the fish are. So choose your depth accordingly. And then the other thing I do is wrap lead wire on these. I want this thing to suspend perfectly. Whether I use lead wire on the treble hooks, you'll see it, I have it on these jerk baits right here, or the Storm suspend dots. They work awesome as well, but they're a little more permanent on your bait. Pick something that will add a little bit of weight to your bait to get it to suspend properly in the water. And then as for a jerk bait setup, both of these are the Icon jerkbait and topwater rod. I absolutely love this rod for a whole bunch of different techniques: swimbait fishing, topwater fishing, and especially jerkbait fishing. The medium power has just enough backbone to it to get the hooks in the fish's mouth, but also has enough give so you won't pull those hooks out if they're just nipping at it. And then the extra fast action has the snap you need to actually give that bait the proper movement. And then I put a 7 1-to-1 gear ratio reel on here. This is an SLX DC, this is a Shimano Scorpion DC, but really any reel that you can get a good far cast with and pick up a lot of line. You're not gonna be working the bait with the reel, it's just to pick up line quickly, and we'll talk through that in just a second here. The last thing is I put 12-pound test fluorocarbon on here to get that bait to its maximum diving depth. You don't want to go too heavy because it will actually cause your bait to rise up in the water because that line becomes too buoyant for the way these baits are designed. So 10 or 12-pound test, all you need on this setup. And then as for color, I really pick either something natural if the water's really clear, or on a sunny, calm day where the water might be a little bit more stained, or just in sunshine in general and I want to call those fish in, I'll pick something with some flash in it like this. So I really don't have any favorite colors. I kind of just go through and see whatever looks good, but something in a natural, like a matted color with a dark back and a lighter side, a pro blue color with some translucency and a darker back, or something shiny like this Table Rock Pro right here. So let's get out on the water and show you how to fish this one. So the jerkbait's gonna come into play for me once that water gets into the 40-degree range and plus. If it's in 30s, I probably won't even use this bait, but anything above 40, we're in business zone there. This thing works exceptional on days just like today where it's bright, sunshine conditions. Those fish are gonna wanna suspend up off the bottom in treetops and sun themselves. So what I'm gonna actually do is find laydowns, which we're gonna have to find some here because there's not that many around right now, but I'm gonna find laydowns and fish this thing through the laydowns or next to them. And I'll show you what I mean once I get up to this one right here. I'm going to work this thing down, and I'm gonna show you how to do this without live scope. I have my live scope on, but I'm not gonna use it. All I'm gonna do is throw this bait right next to a piece of cover I want it to sit next to. I'm gonna give it 2 or 3 cranks to get it down in the water, and gentle twitches, just enough to get your line to pull tight and dart sideways. You don't want your bait doing a lot of different movements this time of year. You want it nice, subtle, slow. That's why we talked about the 3-hook jerkbait. I'm gonna reel up my slack, 2 gentle twitches, and I'm just gonna let it sit there. And I wanna put it right next to these laydowns and just let it float. And that's how I'm gonna get the most amount of bites. It's gonna have to be on calm, sunny days when they're really gonna do that for you, but it's an exceptional bait when that happens, and that's why I like the jerkbait so much. You can use it other ways as well, but the most effective way for me is when they get up and suspend up in the top of the water column trying to sun themselves, and I can pick them off with this bait, just letting it sit next to the object. So right here, throw it out there, I'll reel it down a couple cranks, I'm gonna twitch it a couple of times, and I'm just gonna let it sit. And the colder the water, the longer you can let it sit and draw those fish up off the bottom, and that's why you have that lead wire, so it suspends perfectly. But on a day like today, I mean, I have 50-degree water temperature. I'm gonna let it sit 2 seconds max, 1, 2, give it another little twitch and let it sit there. And then I'll just slowly work it back to me. The biggest thing, keeping it near the cover. You don't want to pull it away too fast before you can draw those fish up out of it, especially if that cover's in a little bit deeper water. And if you're pulling it away too fast, then it doesn't give those fish enough time to actually come up off the bottom and come look at this thing. So take your time fishing it and really let it sit next to those logs, and that's going to give you the most amount of success with this bait. So this log right here is a prime example of what I mean by something I want to sit my bait next to. Those fish could be anywhere down this log. So I'm going to throw it all the way to the base. I'm gonna reel it down 2 or 3 cranks, twitch, twitch, and then try and get those fish to draw out, whether it's at the base or whether they're out at the end. And I'll slowly work my bait all the way down this entire laydown right here, letting it sit each time in between twitches and seeing if I can get one to come out and grab it. And I'll work it all the way through. And sometimes they'll be out on the very, very ends. That could be over 30 foot of water, but if it's sunny, they will come up and sit right underneath of that and use it as cover while they're sitting in the sun, letting themselves get some warmth. Fortunately, no fish on that log today, or any of the logs. They are not cooperating on the jerkbait, but that is how I would fish that jerkbait on sunny days like this to try and get some bites around pieces of cover. Let's get into the last bait here, one that I really like when that water starts to get a little bit warmer. And before we get into the last bait here, only about 14% of you that watch the videos are actually subscribed to the channel. So if you could head down below and hit the subscribe button, that would help me out a ton. I'm trying to reach the 100,000 subscriber goal this year. So if we can get moving towards that goal, it would be greatly appreciated. The last bait that I'm going to throw this time of year is going to be one when that water warms up just a little bit more than these first two, and that's going to be a crankbait. It doesn't have to warm up a ton. I will catch fish in 45-degree water temperature on a crankbait just fine, but you need something a little bit warmer than that 38 to 42 range. If you're in that range there, you're extremely limited on what bait you have, but anything 42 and plus, you could definitely get away with a crankbait if you choose the right one. Now, which crankbait would I choose in those colder water temperatures? It's going to be something with a flat side to it. So whether it's the 6 Sense Flat F4 or the Pressure Series, those are two awesome ones that have flat sides and a tight wiggle. And then the color, I like a red crankbait in the early spring just because the water's usually dirty and it stands out very well. But if you have fish that are feeding on bait fish or shad, you can use chartreuses and white colors as well. Match it to your water clarity and you will have a ton of success with that. If you would like to check out any of the baits talked about in today's video, they will all be linked in the description below, and you can use my code Quince on the 6 Sense website to save 10% off your order and help the channel out a ton. For my setup with this crankbait, I'm going to be using the Cash and Core crankbait rod. That medium heavy power with that moderate fast bend is going to allow me to get these hooks in the fish's mouth, but not pull the hooks when they're fighting in that cold water and barely nipping at the bait. And then I paired this up with a Shimano Corrado. This is the 200 size, so it holds a little bit more line, and it is also in the 6 gear ratio, so I can work my bait a little bit slower because I'm casting and winding this. And again, straight 12-pound test fluorocarbon to allow my bait to get to its maximum diving depth. In cold water, you want your bait to get as deep as possible because a lot of times these fish are going to be as deep as they can possibly get. So that's the crankbait setup as well. Let's go back out on the water again and we'll show you how and where to fish this thing to have the most amount of success this spring. Now, I've just done a video on this crankbait recently, but for those of you that haven't seen it, we're going to walk through how to retrieve this bait in the springtime. Now, you can just cast this thing out there and cover water like this, basically just reeling it through the water column and hoping to get a bite, but that's not really the way that I like to fish this bait this time of year because it's very random. You're not really fishing for fish, you're just kind of reeling around hoping you run into one. But you can target them much more effectively if you actually focus on high percentage areas where those fish live. So let's work our way across over here and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about with this crankbait. So when I'm faced with cover like this and I have a bunch of laydowns all in front of me, that's when I'm going to use this crankbait to go ahead and search for those fish, but still fishing it in a high percentage area and manner. And what I'm going to do is specifically target these laydowns, and I'm going to make very dedicated, accurate casts up shallow to these and pull it all the way down the side of the laydowns. Basically like we just did with the jerkbait, except my bait works a lot faster and a lot shallower this time. So I'm going to put this up there as tight as I can. I'm going to make dedicated casts to each one. I'm going to fish the area thoroughly. I'm not just going to bomb a cast, troll 30 feet, bomb a cast, troll 30 feet. Like, I'm going to pick apart every little crevice that could be in here, and I'm going to fish in very high percentage areas, making sure that I'm fishing channel swing banks, some logs, stuff like that, anything that these fish could hold on regularly this time of year, and making sure I'm keeping my bait in front of fish as long as possible. So let's kind of work through this little stretch here, and you can see all I'm doing is making dedicated casts and slowly winding my bait back out, trying to make as much contact with the cover as possible. Unfortunately, we were running out of daylight, so we're not able to catch one on the crankbait here today either, but if you want to see my favorite bait to catch smallmouth in the springtime as well, check out this video here, hit the subscribe button down below, and thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.